I stood frozen in our living room as my sister Ashley squealed with delight, dangling brand new car keys while jumping up and down. My parents beamed with pride, camera phones capturing her joy. Meanwhile, I clutched my gift from them, a $20 gift card to a coffee shop chain. The contrast couldn't have been more stark or humiliating. In my purse sat the lottery ticket I'd bought for them, planning to scratch it together as a family. Instead, I slipped away to the bathroom, pulled out the ticket, and began scratching. My heart stopped as the numbers revealed themselves. $50,000. In that moment, looking at myself in the mirror, something inside me changed forever. My name is May Anderson. I'm 29 years old and work as an accountant at a small firm in Portland. Our office handles mostly local businesses and some individual tax clients. It's not glamorous, but I've always been good with numbers and responsible with money. Two qualities my parents should have appreciated but never seemed to. For as long as I can remember, I've lived in the shadow of my younger sister Ashley. She's 25 now, though you wouldn't know it from her lifestyle. Ashley is what you might generously call a perpetual student. She's been in college for 7 years, changing majors annually whenever something gets too difficult or simply doesn't hold her interest anymore. First, it was psychology, then business, then communications, then art history. The list goes on. Each time my parents nod understandingly and continue writing tuition checks without question. Our childhood set the pattern. When I brought home straight A's on my report card, my parents would give a quick, good job before turning their attention to Ashley's C+ in math that had improved from a D. Look how much you've improved, they'd gush. My science fair wins were noted with a nod, while Ashley's participation trophies in soccer earned a special place in the living room display cabinet. My dad even built her a custom shelf for them. Your sister needs more encouragement, my mom would explain whenever I worked up the courage to point out the imbalance. You're naturally gifted, May. Ashley has to work harder. I took their words to heart and tried to need less, want less, ask for less. I worked after-school jobs through high school, paid my own way through state college with scholarships and part-time work, while Ashley went to an expensive private university on my parents' dime. Now my life is stable but modest. I live in a small, one-bedroom apartment about 20 minutes from downtown. I drive a reliable Honda that's pushing 12 years old but still runs well because I maintain it faithfully. I paid off my student loans last year, something I was immensely proud of accomplishing before 30. I have a small but growing savings account and contribute to my 401k. Meanwhile, Ashley lives in a beautiful apartment in the trendy part of town, rent paid by our parents. She drives a leased luxury vehicle, also covered by them. On top of tuition, for whatever degree program interests her this semester, they provide her with a monthly allowance that equals almost a third of my entire salary. Why? Because living expenses in the city are so high, and she needs to focus on her studies. This past year had been particularly challenging for me. I was passed over for a promotion at work despite taking on additional clients and responsibilities. We just don't see you in a leadership role yet, my manager explained vaguely. You're so good with the detailed work. Then Jacob, my boyfriend of 2 years, broke up with me in September. You're just so predictable, Mayhe said as he packed his few belongings from my apartment. I always know exactly what you're going to say, what you're going to do. It's like dating a calendar. The words stung more than I wanted to admit. Despite these setbacks, I'd been determined to make this Christmas special. I budgeted carefully for months to buy thoughtful gifts for everyone. For my dad, I found a rare first edition of his favorite detective novel from the 60s. For my mom, I commissioned a handmade necklace from an artist who used stones that matched our family birthstones. For Ashley, I splurged on concert tickets to see her favorite band when they came to town in February. I'd even picked up a $5 lottery ticket on impulse while buying groceries the week before Christmas. I thought it would be fun to scratch it together as a family after dinner, a small, silly tradition we could maybe start. If we won anything, I planned to split it with them. That's the kind of daughter I was always trying to give more than I took. When I pulled up to my parents' sprawling 4-bedroom house in the suburbs on Christmas Eve, I felt a familiar mixture of hope and anxiety. Their home always looked like something from a magazine, especially during the holidays. Perfect decorations, perfect food, perfect family photos on the walls. Though I noticed I appeared in fewer of these displayed images than Ashley did. My mom greeted me with a quick hug. May, finally. Can you help in the kitchen? The Johnsons and Grandma will be here any minute. I nodded, putting my overnight bag in my old bedroom, now converted mostly to a home office with just a futon for when I stayed over. Ashley's room remained preserved like a shrine to her high school accomplishments. While chopping vegetables for the appetizer platter, I overheard my mother talking to my Aunt Linda in the dining room. They didn't realize I could hear them from the kitchen. "The car is hidden at Joe's brother's house," my mom was saying excitedly. "Ashley is going to be so surprised." "That's quite a gift," Aunt Linda replied. "What are you giving, May?" There was a slight pause. "Oh, just a gift card to that coffee place. May doesn't need much anyway. She's so independent." The way she said independent made it sound like a character flaw. Ashley's the one with real potential. She just needs the right support to find her path. I nearly cut my finger as the words registered. Real potential. As if I had none, I blinked back unexpected tears and kept chopping, trying to convince myself I'd misunderstood. But deep down, I knew I hadn't. Christmas morning began with our traditional family breakfast. Mom made her famous cinnamon rolls while Dad prepared his special scrambled eggs with cheese and herbs. Ashley came downstairs in matching Christmas pajamas with our parents, something they'd started doing 3 years ago without ever thinking to get a pair for me. "May, can you set the table?" Mom called as I entered the kitchen already dressed in a festive red sweater and jeans. By 10 o'clock, the house was full. Grandma Wilson sat in the best armchair by the fire. Uncle Joe and Aunt Linda arranged themselves on the sofa with their teenage sons. My parents' closest friends, the Johnsons, claimed the love seat. Everyone had mimosas or coffee, and the excitement of gift-giving filled the air. "Let's start with the presents," my dad announced once everyone had settled in. He always played Santa, distributing gifts from under the tree one by one. I watched nervously as my carefully chosen presents were unwrapped. Dad seemed genuinely surprised by the book, running his hand over the cover reverently. "This is really thoughtful," May, he said, and for a moment I felt a spark of validation. Mom opened the jewelry box and made appropriate, appreciative noises about the necklace, though she didn't put it on immediately as I'd hoped she might. When Ashley opened her concert tickets, she squealed. "No way, they've been sold out for months. How did you get these?" "I bought them the day they went on sale," I admitted. What I didn't say was that I'd set an alarm and spent my lunch break refreshing the ticket website to make sure I got them. Then it was our turn to open the gifts from others. I received a vanilla-scented candle from Aunt Linda and Uncle Joe, socks from my grandma, and a generic coffee table book about national parks from the Johnsons. When Dad handed me a small envelope from him and Mom, I tried to manage my expectations. Inside was a gift card to Starbucks for $20. Not even enough for a week of coffee. "Thanks," I said, forcing a smile while fighting the hollow feeling expanding in my chest. "Now," my dad said with unusual enthusiasm, "there's one more special gift." He handed Ashley a small box wrapped in silver paper with an elaborate bow. She tore into it with her typical energy and pulled out a set of car keys with a luxury brand logo. Her jaw dropped. "Are you serious?" "No way." "Go look in the driveway," Mom urged already, holding up her phone to record the reaction. Everyone moved to the front window as Ashley rushed outside. There in the driveway sat a brand new white SUV with an enormous red bow on top. It had to have cost at least $40,000. The contrast between my $20 gift card and her $40,000 vehicle was so stark it felt like physical pain. I stood slightly apart from the group, watching as Ashley jumped up and down as my parents hugged her as everyone exclaimed over the generosity and beauty of the gift. "Your parents are so generous," Mrs. Johnson whispered to me, a note of confusion in her voice as she glanced between me and the car scene outside. "Yes, they are," I replied automatically, the practiced response of someone who had spent years making excuses for the inexcusable. Grandma Wilson caught my eye from across the room and gave me a sympathetic look. She'd always seen the imbalance more clearly than anyone else, but rarely intervened. I maintained my composure through sheer force of will, even managing to go outside and admire the vehicle when expected to. I complimented the leather seats and the technology package, while Ashley sat behind the wheel, explaining all the features our parents had selected specifically for her. By the time everyone returned inside for more gift opening and Christmas cookies, I felt like I might shatter into a million pieces. I excused myself to use the bathroom, locking the door behind me and finally letting silent tears fall. As I dabbed at my eyes with tissue, trying not to ruin my makeup, I remembered the lottery ticket in my purse. I'd almost forgotten about it in the emotional chaos of the morning. I pulled it out, staring at the shiny, holiday-themed scratcher. The whimsical snowmen and Santa images seemed to mock me now. Almost without thinking, I took a quarter from my wallet and began scratching off the silver coating. I wasn't even paying close attention until I uncovered all the numbers, and something made me look twice. I had to check 3 times, reading the instructions on the back to confirm. My hands started shaking. $50,000. I'd won $50,000. My first instinct was to run downstairs and announce it, to share the news and the winnings with my family as I'd originally planned, to finally have something exciting to contribute. But as I stood there, ticket clutched in my trembling fingers, I heard voices in the hallway outside the bathroom. My father and Uncle Joe were talking in low tones. "The car's a bit much, don't you think?" Uncle Joe was saying. "Ashley deserves it," my father replied firmly. "She's figuring things out, finding her path. This will help her get around to interviews once she decides on a career." "What about May gift card? Seems a bit minimal in comparison." There was a dismissive chuckle that cut through me like glass. "May, she'll probably just put anything we give her in savings anyway. That's just how she is, practical to a fault." Then I heard Ashley's voice join them. "Is May still in the bathroom? So typical. Remember how she cried at my 16th birthday when you got me those designer shoes? She's always been jealous of everything I get." I hadn't cried about the shoes. I'd cried because that same day I'd gotten my college acceptance letter and no one had even acknowledged it. The voices moved away down the hall, but their words remained swirling around me in the small bathroom. I looked down at the lottery ticket again, then back at my reflection in the mirror. Something shifted inside me. A decision crystallized. I carefully folded the winning ticket and tucked it securely in my wallet. Then, I splashed cold water on my face, reapplied my minimal makeup, and rejoined the Christmas festivities with a new secret knowledge burning in my heart. I made it through the rest of Christmas Day on autopilot, smiling when appropriate, helping serve dinner, and participating in conversation without really being present. Inside, my mind was racing, processing the morning's events alongside my lottery discovery. The turkey was perfectly cooked, the table beautifully set with the good china and crystal glasses that only appeared on holidays. As we all took our seats, my father stood to carve the bird and make his annual Christmas toast. "To family," he said, raising his wine glass, "and to special announcements. We're not just celebrating Christmas today, we're also celebrating Ashley's next adventure." All eyes turned to my sister, who beamed. I noticed she was wearing the earrings they'd given her last Christmas. Diamond studs that had made my gift of scented bath products seem childish by comparison. "We've decided," my father continued proudly, "to fund Ashley's summer trip to Europe. 3 months exploring the art and culture she's been studying. Who knows? Maybe she'll finally find her true calling there." Everyone applauded. I took a long sip of wine as my mother launched into details about the itinerary they'd been researching. Paris, Rome, Barcelona, all the major cultural capitals. "What about your job, Ashley?" Grandma Wilson asked practically. My sister waved her hand dismissively. "I'll figure something out when I get back. Mom and Dad understand that this is an investment in my future." I pushed food around my plate, calculating the cost of such a trip on top of the new car. Easily another $15,000 to $20,000, probably more given my sister's taste for luxury. "May, you're quiet," Aunt Linda observed. "Have you ever been to Europe?" "No," I answered truthfully. "I haven't had the chance yet. Between work and paying off my student loans, international travel hasn't been in my budget." An awkward silence fell briefly before my mother jumped in. "May is so dedicated to her career. Always saving for the future, aren't you, honey?" The way she said it made my responsibility sound like a character flaw rather than a virtue. As if my careful planning and hard work were eccentric choices rather than necessities. By 7 o'clock, I couldn't take any more. I stood and began gathering my things, explaining that I needed to leave. "So soon?" my mother asked, though I detected more relief than disappointment. "I have work tomorrow," I lied. The office was closed, but they wouldn't know that. On December 26th, my father questioned. "Year-end accounting," I explained vaguely. "Deadlines don't care about holidays." Ashley rolled her eyes slightly. Always the responsible one. I hugged everyone goodbye, collected my single gift bag containing the candle, socks, book, and gift card, and walked out to my aging Honda. Through the window, I could see the celebration continuing without me, perhaps even more comfortably in my absence. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and Christmas decorations through a veil of unshed tears. But they weren't just tears of hurt anymore. They were also tears of resolve. By the time I reached my apartment, I had the beginnings of a plan. The lottery ticket sat in my wallet like a secret key to a door I hadn't known existed. I spent the next day researching everything about claiming lottery winnings in our state. I learned that for prizes under $100,000, winners could maintain relative privacy. I wouldn't have to do a press conference or have my name published. Just fill out the claim form at the lottery office. I texted my friend Tara, who worked as a financial advisor. We'd met in college and stayed close despite our different career paths. Need financial advice. Can we meet for coffee tomorrow? Important? Her response came quickly. Sure thing. Everything okay? We'll explain in person. Nothing bad, I promise. 2 days after Christmas, I sat across from Tara at a quiet corner table in our favorite local cafe, not the Starbucks where my parents' gift card would have taken me. You won how much? Tara whispered after I showed her the ticket. $50,000, I repeated. After taxes, probably around $35,000. And you haven't told your family, she looked surprised. Tara had met my parents several times and had witnessed firsthand their dismissive attitude toward me. No, I said firmly, and I'm not going to. I explained the Christmas car fiasco, the overheard conversations, the lifetime of being second best. Tara listened without interrupting, occasionally shaking her head in disbelief. So what are you thinking of doing with the money? She finally asked. That's why I wanted to meet with you. I need advice on how to use this wisely. Part of me wants to blow it all on something crazy just to prove I'm not the boring, predictable person everyone thinks I am. Tara smiled gently. And the other part knows that would just be reactive and ultimately unsatisfying, I admitted. I want this money to change my life, but in a meaningful way. Over the next hour, Tara helped me outline a financial strategy. We decided I would set aside a portion for taxes, invest some in a diversified portfolio, and keep some liquid for shorter-term goals. You should also use a small amount for something just for you, Tara insisted. Something you've denied yourself out of practicality. That weekend I claimed my winnings, opted for the privacy protection, and opened a separate account for the money. On my way home, I stopped at a department store and bought myself a beautiful winter coat I'd been admiring for months, but had decided was too expensive. It cost $300, more than I'd ever spent on a single clothing item. Wearing it felt like wearing confidence. The following Tuesday, when my parents' weekly family dinner invitation came via our group text, I declined for the first time in years. Mom, Tuesday, dinner at 6. Dad's grilling steaks. Ashley, I'll be there. Can I bring my new work friend, Jess? Mom? Of course, sweetie. Me, sorry, can't make it this week. Signed up for a photography workshop. The responses were telling. Mom, photography. Since when do you do photography, Ashley? Who are you and what have you done with my sister? Lol, Dad. We'll save you leftovers. I didn't respond further. Instead, I followed through and actually signed up for a beginner's photography class I'd found at the local community center. Photography had been a passion in high school that I'd abandoned to focus on more practical pursuits. When the next family dinner invitation came, I declined again, citing my class. The third week, there was no specific response to my absence in the group text, just an acknowledgement. Mom, so just 3 for dinner tomorrow, plus Ashley's friend Tom. I was simultaneously hurt and relieved to be so easily discounted. A month after Christmas, I was scrolling through social media when I came across a post from Ashley. It showed her new car with a dented fender and broken headlight. The caption read, "Minor fender bender. Thank God for amazing parents who already called their body shop guy." The comments were filled with sympathy and heart emojis from her friends. Our mother had commented, "Anything for our baby girl, car will be good as new by Friday." I stared at the image, remembering my sophomore year of college, when my old car's transmission died. I'd called home in tears, explaining that I needed help with the $2,000 repair bill, or I wouldn't be able to get to my classes and job. "This is why we told you to buy a more reliable car," my father had said. "We're not rewarding poor decisions. Figure it out, May." I'd worked double shifts at the campus coffee shop and taken out a small emergency loan to fix the car. Meanwhile, they had just spent what was probably at least $3,000 repairing Ashley's brand new vehicle after what appeared to be her mistake. Something inside me hardened further. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. It wasn't just my imagination or sensitivity. The double standard was real and had been my entire life. I closed the app and opened my email instead, where I found a message from a photography equipment rental company offering a discount to students in my class. Attached was a beautiful image taken by one of the instructors. Looking at that photo, A simple shot of morning light through a window that somehow conveyed perfect serenity. I felt something stir within me, a sense of possibility I hadn't experienced in years. 6 weeks after Christmas, I walked into the state lottery office with my winning ticket and the claim forms I'd already filled out. The process was surprisingly straightforward. I showed my ID, handed over the signed ticket, selected the privacy option, and provided my bank information for the electronic transfer. "Congratulations," the clerk said with a genuine smile. "Any big plans for the winnings?" "Yes," I replied, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "I'm investing in my future." By the time the money hit my account, $37,500 after taxes, I already had a detailed plan. Following Tara's advice, I immediately transferred $20,000 into the investment account we had, set up $5,000 into a separate emergency fund, and left the remaining $12,500 in a checking account for more immediate use. My first real purchase beyond the coat was a quality digital camera. Not the most expensive model, but a solid entry-level DSLR recommended by my photography instructor. It cost just under $1,000 with the starter lens, an amount that would have seemed impossibly extravagant to the pre-Christmas me. The first time I held it adjusting settings and looking through the viewfinder, I felt a rush of joy that brought tears to my eyes. How long had I denied myself things that brought genuine happiness because they weren't practical enough? My weekly photography classes quickly became the highlight of my routine. Our instructor Dave had a talent for explaining technical concepts in accessible ways, and the small group of 12 students formed a supportive community. Among them was Sam, a graphic designer who was taking the class to improve his professional skills. He had an easy laugh and offered thoughtful feedback on everyone's work. "You have a natural eye for composition," he told me after our fourth class, when we were reviewing each other's homework assignments. "That shot of the abandoned storefront tells an entire story." I felt myself blushing at the compliment. "Thanks. I used to take a lot of photos in high school, but convinced myself it was just a hobby, not something worth pursuing seriously." Sam tilted his head questioningly. Who decides what's worth pursuing? His simple question lingered with me for days. Meanwhile, my absence from family events was finally being noticed. My mother called on a Sunday afternoon as I was editing photos from a morning shoot at the waterfront. "May, we're concerned about you," she began without preamble when I answered. "You've missed 3 Sunday brunches and 4 Tuesday dinners. Are you ill?" "No, Mom, I'm fine, just busy with some new projects." "What projects? You never mentioned anything at Christmas." I bit back a bitter laugh. "I'm taking a photography class and exploring some other interests." "Photography?" She sounded genuinely confused. "Is this about Ashley's car? Because if you're jealous—" "It's not about the car," I interrupted, surprising both of us. "I never interrupted my mother. It's about making time for things that matter to me." "Well, your family should matter to you," she responded, an edge entering her voice. "It does," I said carefully, "but I matter to me too. I'm just creating some balance." The conversation ended awkwardly with my mother extracting a promise that I would come to Sunday brunch the following weekend. When I did show up wearing my new coat and bringing my camera to show my dad, who had once been interested in photography himself, I was unprepared for the reaction. "What's with the fancy coat?" Ashley asked immediately. "And when do you have an expensive camera? Did you get a raise or something?" Before I could answer, my father chimed in. "Photography is an expensive hobby, May. Are you sure that's a sensible use of your money?" The irony of this statement coming from the man who had just spent over $40,000 on a car for his younger daughter was not lost on me. "I'm sure," I replied simply. "I've wanted to get back into it for years, and I'm finally making it a priority." "Well, it's nice to see you treating yourself for once," my mother said with forced brightness. "Though I worry about all these changes at once. First declining family gatherings, now impulse purchases." "They're not impulse purchases," I corrected. "They're intentional choices." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. After brunch, I was helping clear dishes when I overheard my mother on the phone with Aunt Linda in the living room. "I'm worried about May," she was saying in a hushed tone. "She's acting so differently. Missing family events, spending money on expensive hobbies, being almost assertive. Joe thinks she might be having some kind of delayed quarter-life crisis or breakdown." I set down the plates I was carrying with a controlled clatter, making enough noise that my mother quickly ended her call. The knowledge that they were pathologizing my independence rather than respecting it was infuriating but also oddly freeing. It confirmed that any attempt to explain myself would be futile. The next day, walking to work through downtown, I noticed a small "For Rent" sign in the window of a storefront on a side street near my apartment building. The space was narrow but deep, with large front windows and an interesting exposed brick interior wall. Something about it caught my attention enough that I wrote down the contact information. That evening, I called the number and arranged to see the space. The landlord, an older woman named Gloria, showed me around the empty storefront that had previously housed a boutique clothing shop. "It's been vacant for 3 months," she explained. "The previous tenant relocated to a larger space. It's zoned for retail or service business, has updated electrical, and the rent includes water and basic maintenance." As she talked, my mind was racing. The space was divided naturally into 2 sections: a front area with the large windows and good natural light, and a back room that could serve as an office or storage area. The monthly rent was surprisingly reasonable for the location, well within what I could afford with my current salary plus a small portion of my windfall. "What kind of business are you considering?" Gloria asked as we completed the tour. "I'm not entirely sure yet," I admitted, "but I have some ideas forming." Those ideas continued to develop over the next week. I found myself sketching floor plans during lunch breaks and researching small business requirements in the evenings instead of watching TV. A seed that had been planted was rapidly growing. The following week, my mother showed up unannounced at my apartment on a Wednesday evening. I was sorting through photo prints when the buzzer sounded. "I was in the neighborhood and thought we should talk," she said when I let her in, though her tone suggested this was no casual visit. She looked around my apartment with a critical eye, noting the photography books spread across my coffee table and the prints I was organizing. "You've never been interested in photography before," she said, making it sound like an accusation. "Actually, I have," I corrected her. "I was photo editor of the high school yearbook. Remember, I saved for months to buy my first film camera. That was just a teenage phase." "No, Mom. It was a passion I set aside because I was convinced practical pursuits were more important." I kept my voice level. "I'm reclaiming parts of myself I've neglected." She sat down on my sofa, her posture rigid. "Your father and I are concerned. First, you start missing family events, then you're spending money on expensive equipment, and now Ashley says you barely respond to her texts." "I've been busy." "Too busy for family," she leaned forward. "May, if this is some kind of reaction to Ashley's car." "It's not about the car," I interrupted for the second time in our recent interactions. "Though the car is a symptom of a larger pattern." What pattern? Her genuine confusion was perhaps the most hurtful part. I took a deep breath. "Mom, when was the last time you or Dad made my achievements or interests a priority? When was the last time you invested in me the way you constantly invest in Ashley?" Her face flushed. "That's not fair. We've always treated you girls equally." The blatant untruth hung in the air between us. We both knew it was false, but only one of us was willing to acknowledge it. "I'm not having a breakdown or a crisis," I said finally. "I'm just finally prioritizing my own happiness and growth. I would think you'd be pleased to see me thriving." "Of course we want you to thrive," she countered. "We just don't understand all these sudden changes." "They're not sudden to me, they're long overdue." We talked in circles for another 20 minutes before she left, frustrated by my unwillingness to admit to some underlying problem. I closed the door behind her, feeling both drained and strangely empowered. I had stood my ground without losing my temper or backing down. 2 days later, I signed a 1-year lease on the small storefront. I didn't tell my family. I spent the next month preparing the storefront space while continuing my full-time accounting job. Evenings and weekends were dedicated to cleaning, painting, and gradually furnishing the 2-room shop. I decided on a simple white for the walls to maximize the natural light, with one accent wall of the exposed brick left untouched for character. My vision for the space had evolved into something that combined my financial expertise with my rekindled passion for creativity. I would offer specialized financial coaching for artists, photographers, musicians, and other creative entrepreneurs, people who often struggled with the business side of their artistic endeavors. The front room, with its excellent natural light, would double as a small photography studio that could be rented hourly by photographers needing an indoor space. The back office would serve as my consultation area for the financial coaching sessions. I named it Creative Capital and worked with a graphic designer from my photography class to develop a simple but elegant logo and business cards. The entire process was exhilarating in a way that my accounting job had never been. During this time, I remained distant but not completely disconnected from my family. I attended Sunday brunch every other week but declined most Tuesday dinners, citing work on my new project without going into details. My parents had shifted from concern to a sort of bemused tolerance, clearly believing this was a phase I would eventually outgrow. Meanwhile, I was busy building a business plan, creating a website, and developing curriculum for workshops on topics like tax essentials for artists and financial foundations for creatives. I leveraged my accounting background and researched the specific financial challenges faced by people working in creative fields. Sam from my photography class became both a friend and unofficial advisor. With his background in graphic design and experience as a freelancer, he offered valuable insights into the needs of my target clients. Most creative people I know are incredibly intimidated by anything financial, he told me over coffee one Saturday after helping me install shelving in the studio. They either ignore it completely until they're in trouble, or they pay someone else to handle it without understanding what's happening with their money. Exactly, I agreed, excitement building as it always did when discussing my business concept. My goal is to empower them with accessible financial knowledge specifically tailored to creative work. No judgment, no confusing jargon, just practical tools and strategies. Sam smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. You light up when you talk about this, you know. I felt a flush creep into my cheeks. Our friendship had been gradually developing a warmth that hinted at potential for more, though neither of us had explicitly acknowledged it yet. 3 months after signing the lease, I was ready to take the next big step. I scheduled a meeting with my manager at the accounting firm and gave 2 weeks' notice. I had secured 3 regular financial coaching clients through connections in my photography class and had bookings for my first 2 workshops. Combined with the studio rental income and careful use of my remaining lottery winnings, I could afford to focus on growing my business full-time. The grand opening of Creative Capital was scheduled for a Saturday in April. I had designed and sent digital invitations to contacts from my photography class, former colleagues who had been supportive, and a network of local artists Sam had introduced me to. I deliberately did not invite my family, wanting this first event to be on my terms. The opening exceeded my expectations. Nearly 40 people cycled through the small space over the course of the day. I offered mini-sessions on basic tax questions for creatives. Sam demonstrated the studio lighting setups I'd installed, and a local bakery provided refreshments. By the end of the day, I had booked 4 new clients and filled all spots in my upcoming workshop series. As I was locking up that evening, emotionally and physically exhausted but deeply satisfied, Sam helped me clear the last of the refreshments. "This is just the beginning," he said, his confidence in me evident. "You've created something unique here, May, something that's genuinely needed." On impulse, I hugged him. After a moment of surprise, his arms wrapped around me, and the embrace lingered just long enough to confirm what we'd both been feeling. That night, scrolling through the congratulatory messages and photos from the opening, I saw I had missed a call from Ashley. Unusual for a Saturday night when she was typically out with friends. I returned her call the next morning. "Hey," she answered, sounding oddly hesitant. "Are you busy?" "Just having coffee. What's up?" "Can I come over? I need to talk to you about something." An hour later, Ashley was sitting on my couch, looking around my apartment with newfound curiosity. She seemed different somehow, less polished than usual, with her hair in a simple ponytail and minimal makeup. So she began awkwardly. "Mom and Dad mentioned you've been working on some project, but they were pretty vague about it. Then I saw these on social media." She held up her phone, showing posts from mutual acquaintances who had attended my opening. "Creative Capital. You started a business." I nodded, unexpectedly nervous about her reaction. Despite everything, part of me still craved my sister's approval. "Why didn't you tell us?" There was hurt in her voice, but also something else. Respect, perhaps. "Honestly, because I wanted to do it on my own without commentary or criticism. I needed to prove to myself that I could." Ashley was quiet for a moment. "It looks amazing. The studio space, the concept, all of it." "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched by her enthusiasm. "But how? I mean, where did you get the startup money? Did you take out a loan?" I hesitated, then decided on a partial truth. I had some savings and I received an unexpected windfall. "A windfall, like an inheritance from someone I don't know about," she laughed. "Something like that," I replied vaguely. "The important thing is that it gave me the push I needed to take a chance on myself." Ashley's expression grew serious. "Mom and Dad are telling everyone you're throwing your life away on a hobby. Dad keeps saying you'll come crawling back to your accounting job within 6 months. The information stung but didn't surprise me. And what do you think? I think. She paused, looking down at her hands. I think I'm jealous, actually. Jealous of me. I couldn't hide my shock. You're doing something you're passionate about. You're taking risks and making your own path. She looked up, and I was surprised to see tears in her eyes. Do you know what I'm doing? Taking classes I don't care about for a degree I don't want to use in a field I have zero passion for. But the car, the Europe trip, all the support Mom and Dad give you, is suffocating, she finished. They support a version of me that doesn't exist. They've created this perfect daughter in their minds, and I've been playing along because it's easier than disappointing them. I sat back, struggling to reconcile this confession with the confident, seemingly carefree sister I'd envied my whole life. Ashley, I had no idea. She gave a hollow laugh. No one does. It's why I crashed the car, you know. What do you mean? It wasn't an accident. I was so angry after another lecture from Dad about my promising future that I deliberately sideswiped a concrete pillar in the parking garage. She looked ashamed. Not my proudest moment. Why would you damage a car you wanted? That's just it. I never wanted it. The car was their choice, not mine. She took a deep breath. What I want is to move to New York and try to break into fashion merchandising. I've been researching programs there for months, but I can't figure out how to tell them without causing World War III. I stared at my sister, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time in our adult lives. Not as the golden child who got everything, but as someone trapped by expectations in her own way. You should tell them, I said finally. Not for their sake, but for yours. How did you do it? She asked. How did you find the courage to just change everything? I thought about the lottery ticket, the Christmas disaster, the years of inequality. But what I said was, I finally realized that living for other people's approval meant never truly living at all. As Ashley left that day, something had shifted between us. A new understanding, perhaps even the beginnings of a genuine friendship, rather than just the obligatory bond of sisterhood. The following week, a small feature about creative capital appeared in a local business publication highlighting innovative new enterprises in the city. The journalist had attended my workshop and been impressed by the concept of financial education, specifically tailored to creative professionals. I sent the link to my parents without comment. My father's only response was, "Hope you're keeping your accounting license current. Always good to have a fallback plan." 6 months after the disastrous Christmas creative capital was not just surviving, but thriving. Word of mouth had brought me a steady stream of clients, my workshops consistently sold out, and the studio rental space was booked at least 4 days each week. I had even hired a part-time assistant, a college student named Jenna, who was studying both business and photography. I had found my rhythm dividing time between one-on-one financial coaching sessions, workshop development, and my own photography projects, which had improved dramatically with consistent practice. The business wasn't making me rich, but it was already covering its costs and providing me with a modest income that, combined with careful use of my remaining investment funds, allowed me a comfortable life. Doing work I found genuinely fulfilling. My relationship with Sam had deepened into something solid and nurturing. He understood my history with my family and never pushed me to reconcile or conform to their expectations. Instead, he encouraged me to set the boundaries I needed while remaining true to myself. My parents had settled into a pattern of mild disapproval regarding my career change, but had stopped actively criticizing it in our limited interactions. Ashley and I texted regularly, having developed a newfound sisterly bond based on honesty rather than competition. She had enrolled in online courses related to fashion merchandising, but had yet to tell our parents about her plans to move to New York. When the invitation to the annual 4th of July family barbecue arrived via group text, I decided to attend. I felt secure enough in my new life to face the extended family gathering without the raw vulnerability that had characterized our Christmas interaction. The morning of the barbecue, I selected a simple blue sundress that I'd purchased to celebrate signing my first 10 clients. Sam helped me load a homemade apple pie into my new car. Not a luxury vehicle like Ashley's, but a reliable mid-size sedan that better suited my needs than my aging Honda had. "Call me if you need backup," Sam said as he kissed me goodbye. "I can be there in 20 minutes with a fake emergency." I laughed. "I think I'll be okay. I'm not the same person I was at Christmas." When I pulled into my parents' driveway, I noted Ashley's car already there, along with several others belonging to extended family. I took a deep breath and gathered my pie and a small gift bag containing bottles of my father's favorite craft beer. My mother answered the door, her eyes immediately taking in my new car visible in the driveway, my dress, and my generally confident appearance. "May, you're here. And you brought pie." She accepted it with a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Everyone's out back. Ashley's been asking when you'd arrive." I found my sister sitting with our cousins near the pool. She jumped up when she saw me, giving me a genuine hug that drew curious looks from relatives more accustomed to our historically cool relationship. "You look amazing," she whispered, so confident. "How are things here?" I asked quietly. She rolled her eyes slightly. "The usual. Mom's bragging about my summer classes to anyone who'll listen conveniently, failing to mention their online fashion courses rather than the international business program she thinks I'm taking." The afternoon progressed with the typical rhythm of family gatherings. My father grilled hamburgers and hot dogs while uncles clustered around discussing sports and politics. Aunts and female cousins helped my mother with side dishes and kept an eye on the younger children playing in the yard. I noticed several relatives studying me with curiosity. My Aunt Linda was the first to directly address the changes. "May, you look wonderful," she said, joining me at the drinks table. "There's something different about you beyond the new car and clothes. You seem happier." "I am," I replied simply. "I've made some life changes that have been good for me." "Your mother mentioned you left your accounting firm. What are you doing now?" I explained Creative Capital, surprised by her genuine interest as I outlined the concept and early success of the business. "That's absolutely fascinating," she said when I finished. "What a clever way to combine your financial expertise with creative fields. Are you still doing any accounting work?" "Only for my own business and clients," I said. "But I'm using those skills every day, just in a different way." Before long, a small group had gathered to hear about my new venture. My cousin Jared, who played in a local band, asked detailed questions about tax deductions for musicians. Another cousin who crafted jewelry wanted to know about pricing strategies for handmade items. I was in the middle of explaining the importance of separating business and personal finances when my mother appeared at my elbow. "May, could you help me bring out the desserts?" Her tone made it clear this wasn't really a request. In the kitchen, she busied herself, arranging cookies on a platter while I retrieved my pie from the refrigerator. "I wish you wouldn't monopolize the conversation with all this business talk," she said without looking at me. "It's a family gathering, not a networking event." "I was answering questions people were asking me, Mom." "Well, your father and I would appreciate it if you'd steer the conversation elsewhere. Ashley has news about her summer program that she hasn't had a chance to share because everyone's so focused on your hobby business." I set the pie down perhaps a bit too firmly on the counter. Creative Capital isn't a hobby. It's a successful small business that's growing every month. "If you say so, dear." Her dismissive tone was all too familiar. "Now, could you take these out while I find the ice cream?" I carried the dessert platter outside, my mother's words echoing in my head. Some things never changed, including her inability to acknowledge my accomplishments. As everyone gathered around the patio table for dessert, my father stood at the head with a beer in hand, not one of the craft beers I'd brought, I noticed. "Before we dig into these wonderful desserts," he began in his official toast voice, "I want to take a moment to celebrate family. That's what today is all about, celebrating the family we've created exactly as we wanted it to be." He beamed at my mother, then at Ashley. His gaze passed over me with barely a pause. "Linda and I are so proud of what we've built together. A beautiful home, successful careers, and of course our girls." Again, his focus lingered on Ashley. "Especially Ashley, who'll be continuing her education with advanced business courses this summer, preparing for a bright future in international commerce." Ashley shifted uncomfortably in her seat, shooting me a panicked glance. "We've always believed in supporting our children in pursuing excellence," he continued, "in following the paths that will lead to security and success." Something inside me finally snapped, not in anger but in clarity. This narrative, that they had always supported both their children equally, was simply false. And for the first time, I felt compelled to say so, not out of bitterness, but from a place of truth. I stood up, my movement causing my father to pause mid-sentence. "May," he questioned, clearly surprised by my interruption. "I'd like to add something, if I may." My voice was calm but firm. An uncomfortable silence fell over the gathering. No one ever interrupted Dad's holiday speeches. "I appreciate the sentiment about supporting your children," I began carefully. "But I think it's important to acknowledge that support has looked very different for Ashley and me throughout our lives. My mother made a small noise of protest, but I continued. For as long as I can remember, there's been an imbalance in how you've invested, financially, emotionally, and otherwise, in your daughters. Ashley has received cars tuition payments, allowances, and unconditional praise. I've received expectations of self-sufficiency and criticism when I didn't meet arbitrary standards. I looked around at the table of uncomfortable relatives. I'm not saying this to create drama or to ask for sympathy. I'm saying it because pretending this imbalance doesn't exist has shaped our family in unhealthy ways. May this is hardly the time, my father began, his face flushing red. When would be the time, Dad? When have you ever been willing to hear anything that contradicts your perfect family narrative? Before he could respond, Ashley stood up beside me. Her face was pale but determined. She's right, she said, her voice slightly shaky. And there's something I need to tell you both. I'm not taking international business courses. I've been studying fashion merchandising online. And I'm moving to New York at the end of the summer. Our parents stared at her in stunned silence. The perfect daughter you've been bragging about for years doesn't exist, Ashley continued, gaining confidence. She's a person I've pretended to be because I was afraid to disappoint you. But watching May create a life that actually makes her happy has shown me I need to do the same. The silence that followed was deafening. My father looked between us as if seeing strangers. My mother's expression cycled rapidly between shock, confusion, and the beginnings of anger. Is this some kind of coordinated attack? She finally asked. After everything we've done for both of you. It's not an attack, Mom, I said gently. It's an invitation to see us as we really are, not as the daughters you imagined. I'm not the boring, predictable accountant you can dismiss with a gift card. And Ashley isn't the directionless student who needs your constant financial support to find her way. My grandmother, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. Joanne, Joe, I think you should listen to what your girls are actually saying instead of getting defensive. We have always supported our children, my father insisted, his voice rising. You've supported the versions of us that fit your narrative, I corrected him. Not the people we actually are. The conversation that followed was difficult, with moments of anger, tears, and painful honesty. Some relatives excused themselves discreetly, while others, particularly my grandmother and Aunt Linda, stayed as witnesses and occasional mediators. By the end, nothing was resolved, but something important had been exposed to light. My parents retreated to defensive silence, clearly unable to process the challenge to their long-held family mythology. But Ashley and I left together, united in a new way that felt more authentic than any relationship we'd had before. That was the most terrifying and liberating thing I've ever done, she said as we stood by our cars in the driveway. It gets easier, I promised her. Setting boundaries always does. For the first time in our lives, I felt like the older sister she could look to for guidance, rather than the afterthought to her golden child story. The weeks following the 4th of July confrontation were quiet on the family front. My parents didn't reach out, and I gave them space to process. Ashley and I, however, grew closer than ever. She came to me for advice about her move, and I helped her create a realistic budget for life in New York without our parents' financial support. Meanwhile, creative capital continued to thrive. By August, I had expanded my workshop offerings and hired a second part-time employee to manage the studio bookings and administrative tasks. A local arts magazine featured the business in an article about innovative support systems for the creative community, bringing another wave of clients. My relationship with Sam deepened into something I hadn't known was possible. Unlike Jacob, who had found me predictable, Sam appreciated my reliability while encouraging my creative growth. We balanced each other, his artistic perspective complementing my practical approach to life and business. In late August, I received a text from my grandmother asking to meet for lunch. We met at her favorite cafe, where she immediately took my hand across the table. I'm proud of you, she said simply. It takes courage to speak your truth, especially to family. How are Mom and Dad? I asked, realizing I genuinely wanted to know. Processing, she said diplomatically. Your father is still angry, but your mother has been asking questions, trying to understand. They're struggling with Ashley's decision to move. I think they're finally realizing they can't control either of you anymore. We don't want to be controlled, I explained. We just want to be seen and respected for who we actually are. I know, dear. And for what it's worth, several relatives approached me after you left that day to say they'd always noticed the disparity in how you girls were treated. No one ever felt comfortable mentioning it before. As August turned to September, Ashley moved to New York with my emotional support and practical help setting up her new apartment. I flew out for a weekend to help her settle in, and we explored the city together like tourists, cementing our new relationship as friends rather than rivals. I can't believe we wasted so many years competing for their approval, she said as we shared pizza in her tiny apartment. What would we have been like as sisters if we'd been allies all along? We can't change the past, I reminded her, but we get to choose our relationship moving forward. Back home, my photography skills had improved enough that a local gallery included 3 of my pieces in a group show featuring emerging talent. On opening night, Sam stood proudly beside me as attendees admired my work. Moody urban landscapes that captured light and shadow in unexpected ways. To my surprise, my mother appeared at the gallery just before closing time. She moved hesitantly among the displays until she found my photographs. "These are beautiful," Maishi said quietly when I approached her. "You're very talented." "Thank you," I replied genuinely, touched by her presence and compliment. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since July." She continued, her eyes still on my photographs rather than meeting mine. "Your father and we made mistakes. I'm not ready to admit to everything you accused us of, but I can see that we failed to appreciate you in important ways. It wasn't a full acknowledgement of the patterns I'd named, but it was a start, a crack in the perfect family narrative that had defined our relationships for decades. Would you like to come see my business space sometime?" I offered, extending an olive branch of my own. "I'd like that," she said, finally meeting my eyes. Progress with my father was slower. He remained convinced that I had made a reckless decision in leaving accounting and that Ashley would fail in New York without their guidance. But by October, he had at least stopped actively criticizing our choices during the occasional family dinners I attended. As the holiday season approached again, I felt a growing sense of peace about my life choices. Creative Capital was not just surviving but expanding. I had signed a lease for the adjacent storefront to create a larger studio space and add a small gallery area for client exhibitions. My photography had become more than a hobby, with several pieces sold and a commission from a local business for a series of images for their new headquarters. Sam and I were discussing moving in together, taking our relationship to the next level with thoughtful consideration. Most importantly, I had developed a new relationship with myself. One based on self-respect and authenticity rather than seeking external validation. In early December, as I was reviewing my financial plans for the upcoming year, I realized I still had a portion of my lottery winnings that I hadn't allocated. After careful consideration, I decided to use it to establish a small scholarship fund for first-generation college students without family financial support. Students who, like me, had to forge their own paths without a safety net. I named it the Independence Scholarship and worked with a local community foundation to establish the selection criteria and administration process. The first award would be given the following spring to a student who demonstrated both financial need and a clear vision for their future. When Christmas approached, I decided to host the holiday at my apartment for the first time. I invited my parents, Ashley, who would be visiting from New York, Sam, and a few close friends who didn't have family in town. To my surprise, everyone accepted. On Christmas Eve, my small apartment was transformed with simple decorations, good food, and genuine warmth. Ashley arrived first, bringing bagels from her favorite New York deli and stories of her new life. My parents came next, my father stiff but polite, my mother making visible efforts to connect. As we gathered around the table for dinner, I looked at the faces of the people who had shaped my journey, for better and worse, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. Not for the pain or inequity, but for the growth they had ultimately inspired. The gifts we exchanged that year were thoughtful but modest. I gave my father a vintage camera I'd found at an estate sale, acknowledging the interest in photography he'd abandoned years ago. For my mother, I framed one of my photographs of the rose garden she loved at the city park. Ashley received a custom financial planning binder to help her navigate her new independent life. My parents gave me a gift card, but this time to a high-end photography supply store, with an amount generous enough to show they'd put thought into what I might actually need. It wasn't perfect equity with the car they'd given Ashley the previous year, but it represented a step towards seeing and valuing me for who I actually was. After everyone had gone and Sam was helping me clean up, he asked, "Are you okay?" That was a lot of family dynamics to navigate. I considered his question carefully before answering. "I'm more than okay. A year ago, I was letting other people define my worth. Today I know exactly who I am and what I value. The lottery ticket changed my life, but not because of the money. What do you mean? Sam asked, wrapping his arms around me. The money gave me options, but the real change came from finally recognizing my own value, I explained. I could have won $1 million and still been unhappy if I'd continued living for everyone else's approval. Looking back at the year since last Christmas, I realized the most valuable gift I'd received hadn't been the lottery winnings. It had been the painful clarity of that moment, seeing the $20 gift card next to my sister's car keys, and finally acknowledging the pattern that had shaped my life. That recognition had freed me to make choices based on my own values rather than seeking external validation that would never come in the form I needed it. It had allowed me to build a life that reflected my authentic self, practical yet creative, independent yet connected. The perfect family of three my parents had tried to create with Ashley as the star and me as the reliable extra had indeed stayed perfect in their minds. But the reality had transformed into something more complex, more honest, and ultimately healthier for everyone involved. As I hung the last ornament on my small Christmas tree, a camera charm Sam had given me, I felt a deep sense of peace. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. And for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I wanted to be, becoming exactly who I wanted to become. What about you? Have you ever had to set boundaries with family to pursue your own happiness? Did you struggle with being seen for who you truly are, rather than who others expected you to be? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for listening, and I hope your own journey leads you to a place of authenticity and peace.